Andre, welcome to the show.
Hi, Robert. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Really glad to have you on. We had a little talk before the show started, and I'm really interested and excited for everybody listening to be able to pick your brain here. Can we start off with what got you into Bitcoin in the first place, blockchain, and then kind of walk us through your unique journey?
Yeah, interesting. So my background is academically trained computer scientist. So I spent the better part of my career in enterprise software. And about 2007, I got excited about an opportunity to join Citigroup on Wall Street. And I was tasked into helping them build almost like a big brother application. We called it Smart Flows. This business process management, where you would look at, in fixed income, by the way, which is really interesting, is where they convert mortgages into bonds. And that's significant because 2 years later, we would have the housing collapse, right? And I would be at the center of it. So the software is basically to be able to monitor whether, John was converting X amount of mortgages and receiving $140,000 a year, and Jennifer was converting almost twice his, but receiving $80,000 a year. Why was this happening, right? Sort of a cost management. And the opportunity I had was the fact that, designing this system for fixed income at Citigroup, I got to touch everything in fixed income, right? As an engineer, you have to look at everything that's going on. And I was managing the projects with developers, not only stateside in New York, but in Hyderabad, India. So I had a holistic view of what was going on. And then very quickly, in 2009, came the mortgage housing collapse and debacle. And today I understand why, it's really tough to blame the cogs in this major engine, because if you were there at the time, you realize that most of the employees only knew myopically their job and didn't know, everything that was going on. Maybe some of the few high levels, but I would argue even some of the managing directors had very little visibility into all of the mechanics that was going on. And when I started to realize that we were converting mortgages into bonds and we didn't have the paperwork for it, and then I had people under my team working on the CDO desk, which are these products that they were partially made up because it's a product that they were selling. CDO is a piece of paper that references debt, right? For a bank, your debt, my debt is their income. And that's why it's called fixed income, right, at the bank. And what they would do is they would get these CDO products. It's just a SKU, right? You can think of it as a piece of paper. Nowadays, it lives in the database, of course. And they get a bunch of debt, maybe car loans, student loans, and put it together and then sell that, right? That's what a CDO really is. It's a collateralized debt obligation. They would sell that. But sometimes, so let's say they're selling a $500,000 CDO, they're missing $100,000. So what they would do is they would reference another CDO, right? So then I was tasked at the time to have someone on my team look at how many of these references existed. Like, can a CDO own a CDO and that CDO own another CDO? And
Wow.
what we found is that, that went 7 layers deep. And
That's
it
insane.
was, yeah, it was an insane problem, because if you do research today, you'll realize that, we collapsed the world economy almost, right? And it represented 4% of our GDP. That's what the housing collapse was. We sneezed, Europe caught pneumonia, Spain collapsed, Iceland collapsed. It was crazy. The CDO market represents 16 times our GDP, right? So, and I got to see firsthand what really, really happened, it shook me. And then being a technologist at the time, I started to dig around. I had heard, some chatters online about Bitcoin, and I was digging around deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And it was really difficult to find information back then. Right? Today, it's so easy to learn about it. Eventually, I would bump into a small group um, of guys in New York. Some well-known guys like Jonathan Mohan had started a little meetup, and it was 4 or 5 guys, and we would sit in a room and talk about the details of Bitcoin and learn more and more and share information. And it was literally 4, 5, 6 guys.
That's cool.
And eventually, I caught the bug. But for years, before I would even come out publicly and talk about Bitcoin, because I had a career at the time, I was definitely afraid, because you talked about Bitcoin with anyone, right? In 2011, 2012, 2013, they turn to you and say, oh, that's only used for illicit means, drug trafficking.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there going, if you're a trained technologist, you're sitting there going, that makes no sense. Every single transaction can be tracked and traced. You have to be a really dumb criminal to use Bitcoin, right? The papers are pushing this narrative. So as I got into it more and more, I believed that this could possibly replace our monetary system. And I knew the technology was uh, sound, right? Being a technologist and spending a couple of years ripping it apart. And then I said, well, at some point, if I believe in this, I have to jump in with 2 feet. And that's what really got me into Bitcoin. So I transitioned from technology in enterprise software into banking, got rattled a little bit with 2009, learned a lot, um, moved into a couple of companies after that whole 2009 debacle. But at that point, I had already caught the bug, right?
What inspired you to do the hard work to get to the point of catching the bug?
Yeah, well, the toughest part, it's I think it's easier for a lot of the younger technologists and people coming out of college these days, or and individuals who aren't locked into sort of a golden parachute, right?
Hmm.
Right. So when I was in technology and I had grown to the heights of leading my own teams and working for major institutions, walking away from that salary to try to do a startup that doesn't make money in the beginning and the opportunity costs are tremendous, that's very tough. It's always tough in the first couple of years. Although once you get to that point, it's extremely liberating.
Hmm. Yeah, there is the risk or reward there. Not everybody is set for it. Um, so once you caught the bug, what was the next move?
Well, the next move was that I had an idea, and I wanted to build an app, of course, like everybody wants to build an app when they go to become a startup. And I had this idea that Bitcoin ATMs was sort of silly to me, right? Why would they silly? First, they're really not ATMs. They're spot exchanges. You put money, you put dollars in and you get Bitcoins out, or you put Bitcoins in and you get dollars out. An ATM just allows you to access your own money in your own account, right?
Right.
But they're really not ATMs. So let's go with it. I thought to myself, wait a minute, this is digital money. So what if I created an app that I could send Bitcoins to, which we do every day, right? And I could place that money as a credit in your credit or debit card in your pocket. Why would you ever go to an ATM, right? So as it turns out, I did a lot of research, and you know, outside of the United States, and this has been happening for many years. Uh, Transmitting money between individuals is very simple. Here we've had the ACH system, things are difficult. Most Americans are surprised when they work overseas for a little bit or they live in a country, maybe a third world nation. Brazil is a great example. I'm Brazilian by birth. I grew up in New York, but I was born in Rio, and have family in Brazil. So I go visit my dad there. And whenever I'm in Brazil, sending money between individuals for the last 2 decades has been a piece of cake. Today we have Zelle, but it's taken like 20 or 30 years, and we think we're the most, technologically sophisticated country in the world. And you sort of get surprised. I found an Asian bank that could put credit on any Visa or MasterCard in your pocket, a credit card or a debit card. And that astonished me because, wait a minute, why aren't we doing this? We know this can be done because we return goods at Macy's and they put a credit on our credit card, right?
Being in the industry, what do you think the US is behind when it comes to this kind of stuff?
I think because we're hyper capitalistic and the banking industry controls politics, and they make money by the slow movement of money because they receive money and they hold it in overnight markets and they make money from it. I really believe it's a true capitalistic force, right? I'm not saying that's bad. I believe in free markets and capitalism, but I believe that's what delayed it. So anyway, back to the what I called an ATM in your pocket at the time. It was actually called eCoin Cashier. I thought, well, I know this bank in Asia, they can put credit in your pocket. So you send Bitcoins to the little app and you get money in your pocket, or vice versa, right? So you put every Bitcoin ATM out of business. The one problem is that during these small meetups that I would go to, several people would show up. One of the individuals was David Landsman, who is the head of the National Money Transmission Association, who started to wake up the small groups that had these crazy ideas of what we could do with Bitcoin. That was like, hey, guys, this is money transmission. You have to be very, very careful. FinCEN, which is an organization from the American government, they're tasked to enforce the Bank Secrecies Act, the Patriot Act, and money transmission in the United States. And you do something wrong with FinCEN, they'll throw you in jail, right? It's not like the SEC where people are afraid of the SEC, but the SEC is really, they're not an organization that goes after necessarily criminals. They go after people who have broken regulations and they fine you, right? Chances that you go to jail because of the SEC are very small. Now, if they see that you committed a crime, they open up a file for you and hand you over to the Justice Department, but they're really not, an organization that says, hey, you did something wrong and we're going to lock you up, right? So David Landsman made us aware of this. So I quickly, and I think this was in 2012, realized, hey, what I'm about to do may border on money transmission, right? So what do? What I did was I engineered around the problem. Smart. So I looked at a business process and I said, okay, let me create a business process that I believe FinCEN would look at and say, yeah, what you're doing and the way in which you're going about this, right, doesn't constitute money transmission. And money transmission attorneys try to do this all the time. Some of their claim to fame is to get what's called a FinCEN ruling. It's an administrative ruling that basically says, yes, if you do things in that manner, right, you're not a money services business, or you fall into a different umbrella. That's a money transmission attorney's claim to fame. And here I go, an engineer about to request the FinCEN ruling with my business process and no guidance from any attorney, right? So it was an experience. I started writing that. Then after I wrote it, I submitted it. And I was really, really proud of it. They assign you 2 FinCEN officers, And I'm a little bit of an A-type personality, and that's why, I'm a small business founder. So I was always on the phone with the FinCEN officers. And that's
Nice.
something I have to say. Most people in the cryptocurrency space, you know, they look at these regulators as, some type of scary entity. And most of them are super nice. The FinCEN officers I worked with, man, it was their job. They were trying to help me every step of the way, especially when they found out I wasn't an attorney. It was quite a pleasant experience, to
People
tell
are
you.
just people.
Right, people are just people, and they're just doing their jobs, right?
Yeah.
So I struggled, and I got to a point where I submitted the business process asking for the administrative ruling. And of course, I was excited. I called David Landsman and I said, David, can you look at what I did? He goes, oh, just send it to me. I'm like, no, I'm not sending it to you. I'll sit down with you and I'll buy you lunch and you could look at it, right? And the reason for that is because when FinCEN gives you an administrative ruling, what they do is they say yes, and they talk about a high level, but they never publish the actual business process. That's
Got it.
proprietary to me, right? So
Yeah.
why would I go and show the world, what's proprietary to me? So I had him sit down and read it over, and he looked at me and he looked down and he goes, Andre, clever, but I give
Nice.
you a 40% chance of getting an administrative ruling on this. I've seen some amazing things in my life. And I turned to him and I said, why? And then he started breaking down the reasons on what I had submitted. And of course, he's got years of experience. I have no experience whatsoever. So I frantically wrote everything down, did research at home, and I was like, oh no, I'm never going to get this administrative ruling. I really messed up here. Maybe I should have gotten an attorney. So what do? I pick up the phone. I called the FinCEN officer, and now I tell them that I need to change things. I'm like, is there an amendment process? How do I go about this? Right. And he sees that I'm sort of like frantic, and he's turning to me. He's going, okay. So he walks me through the whole process. I submit it. So I give him about a week or so, and then I'm on the phone with them again. Right. Now this guy can't take me anymore. He's like, he turns to me, he goes, Andre, why haven't you got an attorney? I read over your changes, and I have to tell you, I know what you're trying to say or do, but I can't tell you how to write it, but I can tell you what we look for. And I said, really? See, that's how nice he was of a guy. I said, really? Well, please do. And he
Yeah.
sat on the phone telling me, well, we look for this and we look for that. So he was basically telling me, hey, what you're writing here are the red flags that you need to look for and address. So here I go again, sending in another amendment.
Nice.
Right. So I sent in the next amendment, and lo and behold, December 2013, we received a ruling that sort of paved the way for companies and individuals to be able to invest and hold cryptocurrency under their own accounts, which today has paved the way for companies such as Gemini, Coinbase, and other custodians to be able to exist under the money services business umbrella because of that ruling. That ruling also came out with another ruling allowing miners to mine, and that mining cryptocurrency wasn't a money services business task. So today exchanges registered as money services businesses. So anyway, hopefully I helped the community, but I realized then through David Landsman that there are 48 states that have specific money transmission rules. And I said, well, wait a minute, for a startup, this is way too much of a hurdle not to get in trouble. During that time, this 2013, end of 2013, 2014, I don't remember the exact month or date, Charlie Shrem gets arrested because he's done money transmission through FinCEN, and FinCEN is, they made an example of him. I mean, Charlie's one of the nicest guys I've ever known, and they don't even allow him to get off the plane. I think he's coming from a conference in Europe. You know, they arrest him on the plane. I don't know if you've ever met Charlie, but I mean,
I haven't had the no,
yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, it's terrible when that happens.
yeah, he's really well known in the cryptocurrency space today. He does his own podcast. I haven't seen him in a while because he's moved from New York and he spent a few years in jail. You know, but I mean, he was just a young guy in his late teens, early 20s that decided that he could help people deposit money in the Mt. Gox exchange. And he started a company called BitInstant. Even the Winklevoss twins funded him, you know, but he didn't do everything by the book. And they made an example of him early on. And then I said, okay, this is not for me. I wouldn't look good behind bars, you know, even though I had gotten the FinCEN ruling and I was cleared at the federal level. I thought to myself, well, maybe I can get in trouble at the state level, and I can't go through this effort in 48 different states that have 48 different money transmission laws, right? So then I came up with the idea to start what is today Blockchain of Things, which is the company I run.
And what is the main purpose of that company? What's it serving?
So I believe that corporations, more and more now and going into the future, are going to need the services of the global immutable ledger, right? So it has very interesting properties. One of the properties is the fact that we can log things, right, and put a cryptographic signature on the blockchain, and whatever that data is can't be modified in any way, shape, or form. And if it is modified, we can know beyond any shadow of doubt cryptographically that it has been modified, right? So this applicability can be applied to supply chains globally, pharmaceutical products, range in myriad of things, right? Aside from the fact that we could also do such things as generate digital assets or tokens on the system, and those tokens can represent anything from art to stock to bonds, right? So there are many uses for this global ledger. Now, companies have realized that there are many uses. Companies ranging from IBM to smart startups, and they've launched their own versions of blockchains or distributed ledgers. Distributed ledgers aren't really blockchains, but they're similar enough that they get away with saying they're blockchains, right?
What's the difference?
Well, the difference is that in a blockchain, which is really defined by Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is the first blockchain and the standard everyone goes off of, all of the data is completely replicated to every single node, right, in the chain. So there's a record of truth on every single person's computer that's verifiable, right? In a DLT, that's not exactly how it works. You're not having every single computer on the network with a record of the truth that's unmodifiable. First, traditional DLTs, you can modify information, right? And that's one of the first aspects of DLTs, like the banking consortium first released a product called Corda that they claimed to be a blockchain, and quickly the technologists in the community said, that's not a blockchain, it's a DLT. Wait, a blockchain that you can modify the records, a blockchain that not everyone holds one source of truth, right? So there are these small differences, but some of these differences are important for corporations. For instance, the Bitcoin blockchain is very powerful cryptographically, right? But cryptography is an umbrella of technologies, one of which we commonly hear of called encryption, right? Encryption is a subset of this umbrella of technologies called cryptography. And encryption is basically obfuscation of data. Well, Bitcoin doesn't use encryption at all because it's an open ledger that everyone can see every transaction. So nothing's encrypted. But in transmission of information for a corporation, encryption is pretty darn important,
And it's
right?
becoming more important for the individual as well.
Right. So when you start looking at uh, public open ledgers such as Bitcoin or Ethereum, you start to realize, hey, they don't come up to par for corporations, right?
Mhm.
They're really good at transmitting the value of their native token, be it Bitcoin on Bitcoin or Ethereum on Ethereum. And they're really great ledgers because they have global footprints, right? And they're really great ledgers, especially Bitcoin, because it's been proven hack proof, right? We can't say the same for the other ledgers, right? So all of a sudden you have a record of truth that sits at every corner of the planet. You have a ledger that you can implicitly trust. So how can we use that as a corporation? I started to realize that that could be done on Bitcoin.
Hmm.
I could add a layer to send transactions instantly. I could add a layer to protect every application built and represented by a Bitcoin address on my layer. I could piggyback on this global structure and allow any small developer or corporation to take advantage of the global Bitcoin blockchain in the same way, shape, and form that companies that produce DLTs today pitch corporations to use their DLTs. The difference being that the DLT, take a Hyperledger, for instance, you have to run your own instance of that DLT and have your partner run his own instance and connect both of them. And you could do that with a standard database, which in many ways is more robust than a blockchain, right? Because it has different properties than a blockchain has. But then you don't get the benefits of global auditability that Bitcoin brings to the table, or uh, information in every corner of the planet, right? A, a record of truth that everyone trusts. So if you could add encryption, permissioning, instant transactions at the cost of cents, I believe that you would have a winning product. And that's exactly what Katenis by Blockchain of Things is. We don't have our own blockchain, right? So most people get confused. They say, oh, blockchain of things. So what
Right.
blockchain do you run, right? We
Let me
don't.
ask you this real quick. So when like we had the 08, 09 Great Recession, we've had the accounting scandals. Why would a company, is it outside pressure from investors? Is it a public relations thing where you see people going green? Why would they want to have that information distributed rather than keep it private to where something hinky was going on, they wouldn't get busted?
Yeah, well, that's what's interesting about adding an encryption layer on top of the global Bitcoin blockchain, because you're right. But a lot of these companies are highly regulated. So they may not expose the information to the regular individual, although there's plenty of use cases where I think corporations would get more buyers if the information were exposed, right? And we can talk about that a little bit later. Like, for instance, can I verify that my Rolex is real as a consumer and trust that that certificate or my diamond lives on a blockchain and is blessed by Rolex or the person who sold me the diamond with a GIA certificate? Those are separate use cases, but a lot of these corporations, even when you obfuscate the data through encryption, right? If the auditor comes to you and he says, well, I'd like to audit your occurrence or what happened. All of a sudden, you could say, okay, here's all the data on the blockchain, and they have 100% trust because they know that nothing has ever been modified. And we had a customer early on that did exactly that. The name of the company is called ISMS, and they have a content management system, sophisticated content management system, but a content management system nonetheless. All it really does is it controls the documents in a flow. And they sell this to the industrial military complex. So let's imagine that Lockheed Martin is using their software, right? They don't talk about their customers because they're in the industrial military, but let's assume that they do. Lockheed Martin gets a contract with the US government. They don't build everything. They literally have tens, if not tens of thousands of subcontractors, making everything from small chips to airplane seats to knobs. They don't make everything, right? And all of these subcontractors have to adhere to standards, documentation of what they did. They're based on what's called ISO standards in the United States. Well, anyone who has done a complex project knows that creating documentation is just a pain in the rump, right? So what do the subcontractors do? Well, they don't create all the documentation like they're supposed to, right? And then regulators will come and cherry pick the subcontractors to see, hey, did you adhere to the standards and all? And they get audited. Well, the audit process for some of these subcontractors, the documentation alone can fill a room. I mean, that's how complex making these jets and things are. So what would you do if you're a subcontractor? You sit in the back room with a team of guys cleaning up your documentation as fast as you could, right? Sure. While you're being audited. But some of these audits can take 6, 8 months, a year or so. So ISMS came to us and said, hey, Andre, we want to do something very, very simple. What we want is to get these document packages, get a hash or a signature over these packages and log them to the Bitcoin blockchain. So in the future, when regulators come, they can grab the package, throw it in a little app that we built them that's open source, right? Drag and drop it. It produces a hash and it compares the hash, the signature over the payload that the subcontractor gave them, compares that signature up against the signature in the Bitcoin transaction. If they match, they know that the documents haven't been modified in any way, and they can trust what the subcontractors have done. And that's just one example of corporations that could use the infrastructure, but need not expose the data, right? So a signature over the data, knowing that the data hasn't been modified, is enough. And that's basically one of the functions that we do. We transmit any amount of data through the peer-to-peer network. We allow you to generate tokens that can even live on third-party blockchains. Like in Katenis, you can generate as many tokens as you want with a click, and you can export them to Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Polygon, so you have no lock-in. You can bring them back in. So we have very interesting functionality for companies not to have lock-in to one specific stack or technology.
What's
right?
the benefit of creating your own token?
Well, that's interesting, and I think that benefit is really a horizontal benefit, and it crosses many different industries, right? So I think we've just started to see tokens being used as representations of art, right?
Yes. NFTs.
We did a project at Art Basel where we put RFID chips inside of art. This specific art was a female dress made out of Brazilian rubber. No woman would wear it because it's like 300 pounds, but it's a piece of art. And there was bracelets and bags made out of Brazilian rubber, and we put NFT chips on them, and you would scan the dress and you would scan the bag, and the provenance of the bag was logged to the blockchain, and it would pop up automatically. So you can now tie tokens to those things, right? And those tokens can represent rewards. So you can now have a greater tie to your customer And later, if your customer has X amount of tokens, maybe they get greater discounts, right? So, and then the obvious use cases are, yeah, I can generate a token. It can represent a bond, stock. I can fractionalize real estate. I mean, those are the obvious ones, right? But I think we're going to see on the consumer side, in the gaming arena, in the high-end products such as Rolexes and diamonds, and all of these things are being built. And we are technology to allow you to build that very fast on the most trusted blockchain in the world, which is Bitcoin, right? You no longer need a DLT. You no longer need to look at secondary or tertiary blockchains that get hacked every day. You know, we hear about these hacks. One of the largest hacks just happened on Ethereum, Binance, and Polygon just a week ago.
It was
Over
like,
600.
yeah, and they got half of it back, but they still lost 300 million, right?
Yeah, it was one of the
Yeah.
biggest hacks. So you could now use, and if you're a corporation and you're looking at these other blockchains, it's silly because they don't know we exist, right? So we're trying to get our name out. It's tough when you're a small startup for people to try. We're revamping our website pretty soon. I would say probably middle of September there'll be a freemium account where you could use the product, you know, to see proof is in the pudding. So we're going to have a freemium model, which we don't have now, and we're revamping some of the pricing and what we're doing as a big push for the September timeframe.
That's really cool. It's nice to hear that somebody's taking encryption seriously. I like the idea of what the blockchain offers, but there you do hear a lot about the hacks and the risk and the fraud, and there is that transmission of data that's super important. What's are you pushing, I would imagine, into the enterprise space? Are you working with small businesses, medium-sized businesses? What initial market are you going after?
Our focus will be in the enterprise space, but we have pricing for small companies. Being a small company ourselves and individual developers, we're very sensitive to the fact that in the beginning it's tough, right? You don't have deep pockets to have the ability to buy great technology or spend money on great technology. So we do have special packages for companies and individual developers. If they contact us, we'll work with them. We'll never lose a customer. We'll do whatever we can to ensure that they have, you know, they can build on the best blockchain and use the best product out there. But our initial focus is mainly enterprise customers.
Outside of regulatory, so you get into the SMBs, and I found through my own conversations with a lot of these people, there's different levels of sophistication. They're really great at what they do, and then as they're growing, they get better at sales, they get better at marketing, they get better at supply chain. Um, what would be some of the use cases for them, non-governmental, that they would want to start thinking, at least get some of the concept of being on the blockchain as a small and medium-sized business?
Um, to be honest with you, I think most of the innovation is coming from the small and medium-sized businesses when it comes to blockchains. Larger enterprises, they're very slow to move. They're slow to move for several reasons, because they need companies like my own to help build rapid development layers that they can easily integrate with, right? If their core competency was blockchain integration, they wouldn't be producing Oreo cookies or something else, right? Their core competency tends to be highly focused. So what you get a lot of are the startups in the scene creating little apps to be able to fractionalize real estate and trying to sell that to the bigger guys, or companies creating little apps to be able to create NFTs for digital and physical art, and trying to build communities around that, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of the innovation and what's really happening is small companies. And the big revolution, I believe, though, in the whole blockchain cryptocurrency space is that these companies, and sometimes they're not even companies, they're really just open source projects, right? And these open source projects bring people together, and the individuals who are working on this project, they're really not working on it always for pay. They're doing it for love.
Mm.
And that's significantly different than we've ever seen historically, right? Historically, we've seen people get together because, they need to put food on their plate for their kids. Today, you see people building these things because there's possibly a monetary incentive with cryptocurrency or tokens that are tied to their project, and they want to see their project succeed. So they're willing to forego the payment today for a bigger take tomorrow. And in doing so, they really put their heart and soul into what they're building. And from a historical perspective, I don't think we've ever seen this revolutionary movement the way we're seeing it now. The whole open source and project. And it's funny that I talk about that because that really touches me. But I'm a for-profit company, so
Yeah.
I'm diametrically opposed to how we do things is diametrically opposed to how I see the industry in general, right? But business is business, and there's a lot of businesses out there that have closed source products and sell to other corporations. So we're in sort of the opposite space of a lot that's happening here, but I think that what's happening here is significant to keep an eye on because things are transforming rather quickly.
Well, I mean, the financial system is so huge. It makes almost literally makes the world run. We're talking about the global economy. So there's going to be a massive amount of opportunities, bunch of mini niches, medium-sized niches, and then just platform use cases where things take over. You mentioned something about the passion. What is it about either crypto or blockchain to someone that's uninitiated there? I can just use, maybe they're getting used to tap to pay. Why do they need to, or why are we going towards crypto and blockchain, and how's it going to affect the person on the street?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question, right? Because I've gotten that many years. People will turn to me and say, okay, Bitcoin, so what? I could use PayPal and send you money, right?
Yeah.
Why are people so excited about this, ability to send this digital unit? And it's so nuanceical, but that nuance is so important, and that is the decentralization aspect, right?
Mm.
So many companies, we have examples right now. So if you hear in the news, OnlyFans is taking away, the ability to show any pornography, for instance. Well, depending on how you view the world, you don't view that as a bad thing. But why is it happening? Well, if you dig under the covers, it's happening because Visa, MasterCard, and the banks threatened to pull out and collapse OnlyFans, right? Well, that doesn't happen with Bitcoin because there's no central authority. So what's the big difference for the newcomers in your audience? Well, the big difference is that when I send you money through PayPal, Robert, PayPal has basically a central database that it's debiting my account and crediting yours centrally. You get the money and I get deducted the money in my account.
Mm-hmm.
And at any one point, they could flick a switch and make my account disappear and your account disappear and lock you out.
And I've heard those stories. Yeah.
Right. So that fundamental difference is why Bitcoin, right? Because now there's no central authority that can do that, no government, and we've just been proven this. So in the Bitcoin community, we've been hearing for years, oh, wait till China shuts you down and Bitcoin will collapse. And I even have family members who turn to me and say, Andre, you're under an illusion. Wait till China outlaws mining and shuts down every exchange. And guess what? That just happened 2 months ago. They shut down every mining rig. 1/3 of mining was out of China. They blocked banks from converting money for anyone in Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. So overnight, they shut everything down. And that was the big, to do. And you know what Bitcoin did? A quick hiccup, and we're back up stronger than ever. And that just goes to prove that, and remember, China is not just China. China owned 1/3 of all mining rigs in the world was on their territory, on their soil, right? So the United States could do the same and we'd feel lesser of a blip, right? So there's really, you either embrace it, right? And we know that there are nodes in China because like I run a full node on the laptop I'm speaking to you through, right? Every single Bitcoin transaction, the $1 trillion in the blockchain sits on my laptop, like it sits on millions of laptops throughout the world. So we know that there are thousands, tens of thousands of nodes in China. So China can try to bring it down and do everything possible, but Bitcoin technology is sort of unstoppable. And if you're in any field where you've been hurt by the banking system, and that doesn't just mean pornography, right? There's all sorts of
The marijuana
legitimate businesses. There's all sorts of legitimate businesses or small countries. I think about the embargoes that happen with individuals who can't get bank accounts in Cuba because of their government. Well, you know what? Their government is terrible. And we should impose embargoes on them. But the citizens should be able to transact and do business. And Bitcoin allows for that, right? So it's no longer at the power of the government level. So even totalitarian nations, right, when they clamp down on an individual, what's the first thing they do? They shut off everybody's bank account, or you wake up in the morning. In the 80s, this happened in Brazil with the hyperinflation. You woke up in the morning and the government told you, hey, you know that $100 you had in the bank account? Well, you only have 60 now, because we have to fight this hyperinflation. We're all in it together, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't your doing, but you get the effects of it. And that fundamental difference, to be able to be your own bank, to not have a central authority, be able to shut you down and control a transaction, that's fundamental, right? Then when you look at apps like our own, we're going further. So we're adding a layer to deliver any content, right? It could be a movie, a song. Maybe it's a message that the government doesn't want you to hear, right? You could build that on our network, on the global Bitcoin blockchain. So that fundamental difference, you may think, oh, it's just transmitting a unit of value. Oh, no, now, there are other technologies that allow you to transmit content of any size, of any type, right? So there's a freedom there that is substantial. And once someone understands that freedom is when you fall into the rabbit hole and it becomes more than just a technology and almost a religion.
So what I hear you saying is power to the people, basically. You don't have to deal with big government. You don't have to deal with powerful institutions, and one human to another human can have a transaction and it's just done.
Yeah, that's the altruistic goal. Are we 100% there? No, technology still has to build, right? And in an arena where you're getting individuals, and you can see this on the news a lot now, at the government level and at the Federal Reserve saying, hey, this is dangerous, we got to tax this, we should outlaw it, even senators, right? But we had the same during the inception of the internet. When the internet first came about, it was only going to be used for child trafficking and pornography and illicit drugs. And that's all you heard all over the news. And that was the same debate that was happening in Congress, because they can't see the benefits, right? All they see is what the negative impacts could be to their control. And this is very, very scary to a government, right? Bloomberg just had an article yesterday saying a seismic shift may be coming on all fiat currencies in the next 5 to 10 years. And this is their quoting their experts, basically saying, hey, you know, the world might start running off of cryptocurrencies as opposed to the US dollar. And that strikes fear into central control, right? And
Sure.
so that's the altruistic view. At a more personal perspective, there you want to hope that Bitcoin succeeds, right? Because we know we're going towards that future anyway. We know that China has released its own central bank digital currency. We know that the feds are working on a central bank digital currency. So why would a person like you or I, if we're just common individuals and have nothing to do with cryptocurrency, should root or push for the success of Bitcoin? Right? That's the big question. And the answer is simple. If one understands that cryptocurrency is programmable money, one understands that it's easier than ever for a central authority to control your money. So let me cite an example. Imagine we're in the height of the pandemic and the government turns to you and says, we don't want you to go out of your house, and you can only go out of your house to purchase bread, eggs, or to the supermarkets locally. They can centrally sit there and program that, where you can't spend your money anywhere else.
Okay.
That's not only doable, it's doable on many cryptocurrency platforms today. There are cryptocurrencies out there that are centrally governed that you can flick a switch and lock someone's wallet. They can't spend a dime out of that wallet of your cryptocurrency. It's programmable money. So if we allow, as an individual, government entities to control a central bank digital currency, it's an ugly future because we know what happens, right? I had a friend at a bar right in the beginning of the COVID outbreak that I turned and I said, yeah, I think this might get ugly. You know, they might shut down New York. And he looked at me and he shook his head. He goes, Andre, are you insane? This is the financial capital of the world. They would shut down New York and tell businesses to close. That will never happen. You sometimes I think you live under an illusion. And I haven't seen him since COVID, but I can't wait to share a beer with him and say, yeah, I thought that wasn't possible.
First round's on him.
Right. So from an individual perspective, even if you're not involved in cryptocurrency, you should be, right? You should be pushing for it. You should be speaking positively of it because the alternative is really a scary alternative.
Well, China's developing their own digital currencies. And it sounds like, I mean, it's not like they are scoopers up of their citizens' data and they try to control it. So if they're what you're talking about, flipping a switch or being able to trace well, I guess with the blockchain, you can still trace, but if they can flip a switch, then they would be able to control how their citizens are spending money, or they could effectively shut down an entire business that they get upset with by making you couldn't spend money there. Yeah, that's terrifying. So, but because the Bitcoin blockchain is decentralized, that can't happen with that blockchain, right?
Correct.
Is there room for two or more, like Ethereum and Bitcoin, to exist as years go, or is this all going to collapse into one blockchain? In your opinion?
I think that blockchains in general will exist, other blockchains in some way, shape, or form, but I'm a true believer that history repeats itself, right? So shortly after I graduated college, the internet became pretty big. And back then, if you read, and I actually do a slide when I do public speaking about this, every magazine in the country had quotes such as intranets, not the internet, is
Hmm.
real and being used by corporations, right? And intranets are going to be the future based on internet technology, right? At the time, you had IBM selling this email system called Lotus Notes. And IBM would get on stage and say, "Oh, you need Lotus Notes because how are we going to get email to scale to billions of people throughout the world? That's impossible. So buy our product, you know." And I can get footage of that when they were selling Lotus Notes. I had a friend who, right after the big bankers funded AOL, because AOL was the intranet to beat all intranets, right? There was CompuServe and there was AOL, right? And movies were being made about, you know, hooking up with your girlfriend via AOL chat, you know. So it was big. And I had a friend
Huge.
building an intranet for recruiters. I had another friend, you know, comp sci guys, you know, right out of school, full of energy, building an intranet for models in New York, right? So intranets were going to be the whole thing, and it was obvious because Wall Street funded AOL to the tune of $168 billion. I don't remember the exact year, but I think it was 97, 98.
That's
So much
incredible.
so that this small intranet company bought Time Warner, right? Insanity, like total insanity, because we were going to have an intranet for car tires. We were going to have an intranet for banks, because no bank would ever be on the internet. Oh no, that's scary. You know, you needed your own little app that you launched that communicated through your modem to connect to your bank to be able to do a deposit. This whole internet thing is never going to work. And at the time, quite frankly, as a technologist, they had good reason, because we didn't have the SSL and encryption technology we have in our browsers today. So they even had, you know, a foundation to make that argument upon. Today, when it comes to Bitcoin, they don't even have the security foundation for that. They can't say, "Oh, Bitcoin's been hacked." They can't say, "Oh, we can break Bitcoin." None of those arguments exist, right? Even the argument that did exist, where one large nation is going to go against the cryptocurrency, and most of it is concentrated in China. And when China brings it down, even that argument has dissipated, right? So if history follows what I lived as a technologist and my friends, then there will be a major consolidation. Now, people will argue and say, "Well, that can't be, because you can't build applications on the Bitcoin blockchain," because they really believe that until they come to blockchain of things and use our product, which you
Right.
can build applications on the Bitcoin blockchain. That's what we do. And that's what we've been doing for our customers. And we've been around since 2015, right? Sure, we're a startup. We're not as vocal as many other companies, and we're building slowly as we go along. But that argument that, you know, I need Ethereum, I need this other specialized chain, that's starting to dissipate, right? That's starting to dissipate with Katenis, our product from Blockchain of Things, the Lightning Network, and many other projects that are starting to build. A great project that's out there is called RGB, which is a new form of creating tokens and smart contracts, anchoring information on the Bitcoin blockchain as a second layer. It's a great project that my company has even contributed to for free. So those things are building, and the technology is accelerating faster and faster and faster. So I think in the next 5 to 8 years, we'll see substantial consolidation, right? And that, I say to your audience, be very, very wary when you're putting your money into these alternative currencies that are not Bitcoin,
Hmm.
right? Because the market will shift. We know, at least experienced people that have lived this paradigm before, right, know what's probably going to happen. I can't, am I an oracle of the future? I'm not. but I'm an oracle of the past, right? So I know what's happened in the past where every single expert in the world talked about intranets for everything and why AOL was valued at the crazy figures it was valued at and where we are today, right? It's easy to be an oracle of the past,
Yeah.
right? The question is, will the past repeat itself? And most historians tell you it always repeats itself.
That's a good point for the audience. So keep in mind that out of the Great Depression, everybody listening, everybody's watching, came some of the biggest companies. When we had back in 99, 2000 and the dot-com bubble burst, a lot of companies disappeared. But out of that, you had eBay and Amazon. We had some Google, we had some massive companies. And so as you're making this point, we're there we'll probably see some contraction. But then there's organizations like yours that are contributing to the foundation of the long-term value of the blockchain. And that's the kind of stuff that tends to survive. So I'm wishing you for sure the best of luck. What was great about this conversation, Andre, is that it wasn't just like a passion plea. Like you've really thought through this stuff. You've talked to some incredibly important people in the space. You've been operating in Bitcoin for a long time, and you're adding something that I think is extremely valuable for businesses. I'm a huge fan of encryption. I hate seeing some people try to undermine it. So I'm really excited. We're going to put all of your contact information, all of your company's contact information in the show notes for everybody to find. And I really appreciate you being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Robert.
Absolutely.
I hope to do this show again in the future.
Looking forward to it.